Welcome to the TRICHOMES Weekly Roll Up, where we cover the latest in legalization topics and cannabis news headlines. Within a bicameral omnibus spending package released by lawmakers in the United States Congress this week, Washington, D.C. would remain barred from allowing adult use cannabis commerce. Brittney Griner, a WNBA professional athlete, was arrested on charges of transporting liquefied cannabis by the Federal Customs Service of Russia. The management of the Phoenix Mercury basketball team in Arizona confirmed, where she remains in Russian custody as Ukraine violence continues. Federal employment candidates who hold investments in cannabis firms may soon be denied by U.S. President Joe Biden's administration, and individuals who have been targets of the failed war on drugs will get the first permits to distribute legal adult use cannabis in the state of New York. And now, here are your hosts, Steve Hawkins from the U.S. Cannabis Council and Jared Duggins.
Hey,
Jared.
Steve, happy Friday.
Happy Friday to you, my friend.
Good to see you again, as always.
Good. I've been elevated to a host.
Yeah. Well, you're here with us, every second Friday here, and this has become a big part of ours. John, he's over in Europe right now.
Okay.
Yeah, he hopped the bus or Airbus, I guess, on all the way over to Europe, and I think he's going to be doing Cannabis amongst a few other things, but I don't think everything's cannabis. I think he's just kind of enjoying himself as well. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I know we've got a couple different points of news that come from your neck of the woods over there, and we've got a few federal issues we're going to be talking about. But first, just wanted to check in, see how you're doing. How's life over in DC?
Life is good. What is amazing, Jared, is how much happens in 1 month, right? From the last time we talked in terms of cannabis, right? From great things, right? Like the growth of the industry and the new numbers that came out in terms of jobs and so forth. But then, of course, everything that's not so good. And I know we'll get into everything. So there we are.
Oh, yeah. Well, and, citing that, it's let's jump into hometown right away. It's one of those things that that bicameral bill just came out, and in DC, commerce has been banned. You being boots on the ground over there, what does that mean? I know there's a medical aspect to it. I know realistically, I think this is talking more so about the retail and or adult use type sales. What's going on over there?
Yeah, it doesn't affect medical, but what's been the case for a long time now in DC, you have the people of DC having voted to legalize cannabis for adult use, and Congress using its power, to control DC's budget, has restricted DC from being able to create retail sales. Jared, that's being done by one congressman, Andy Harris, he's the lone Republican congressman out of Maryland, but this is if Perlmutter is wedded to banking, Harris is wedded to stopping DC from getting retail sales going, which is unfortunate. I think he uses up all of his chits on the budget committee to block this, right? And some of the folks listening may be saying, well, how, if the Democrats are in favor of retail sales in DC, which I think everyone is, how does something like this gets blocked in the budget committee? And part of it is that, I think that that committee tends to function like in a bipartisan way, and but I think the problem is that the ranking minority on that committee, Jared, is a Republican congresswoman who hates cannabis. Right? So she also put her weight behind it to make sure that this rider stayed in place. But look, I don't think when it gets to the Senate, I can't imagine Senator Leahy keeping it on. He took it out of the budget over there before, so we will see, right? But it continues to be this really, and the problem is all it means is that this underground market in DC, just will continue to be there, which can carry some problems, right? Because there's some decent folks in the legacy market, obviously, but there's all kinds of concerns that arise around public safety and just what's going on. So, yeah.
Right. Well, like you said, there's a gray market kind of created by the fact that you can grow and you can gift and you can do that. It's kind of like the mid-step that California did. And like you said, there's the reason the rules are there are for people that have home grow and have the ability to produce it themselves without the taxes and have home remedies and that kind of stuff. But really, without these next steps being taken, these next steps being implemented, right? They're allowing for this to grow improportionately to the way the other markets not being allowed to grow, right? So realistically, they're allowing for the people who are taking advantage of the situation, right? And a lot of times that turns into industrious people, which are one aspect of it, but then it gets into organized crime, and that's the part where again we're still allowing organized crime to use cannabis as a currency, as to where really you legalize it here in the States and it's no longer part of the barter system here. The illicit market's always going to be there, right? It's in some form or fashion. It's just that you can minimize cannabis's role in that by doing these things, and they're just shooting themselves in the foot. Either that or working with agendas we don't know about, right?
Yeah. But look, at some point, we will see retail sales in DC. And look, I think that's going to be a game changer when it happens, because, we need to have more members of Congress just see that, the sky is not going to fall down, right? That cannabis is normalized, right? And, in every state where cannabis has legalized, right, we've seen positions change, right? And so it's important, really important, that in the nation's capital we get to the point of retail sales.
Absolutely. Now I know you guys had responded to this as the USCC, and a lot of that comes from basically quote from yourself. I know you guys are out there talking. Have you had words with Representative Andy Harris yourself, or is it something as to where you guys get shut out of conversations with those two people you were just talking about?
Yeah, I have not talked with Harris, but I know he's entrenched on this, Jared. If I thought that there was any way to change his mind, I would be the first one in his office. But he is just ideologically driven around this, and it goes to the larger, I think, question of just how, as we're looking at democracy being challenged around the world, here we have the people in DC having voted to legalize cannabis and have retail sales being blocked, from their own democratic rights are trampled upon. That's the reality of it.
And it's not just happening in DC. It's the same thing that happened in South Dakota with Hochul, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yep, you're right.
You're absolutely ridiculous.
Right. Yeah.
Which is the scary part when it comes to the next couple of topics that we have coming up. And scary from a telltale spot when we're talking about the Biden administration and cannabis investments, but backing into that through Brittney Griner and the situation with her being caught with the liquefied cannabis or vape in Russia and still being held there. Realistically, for those who don't know, it was pretty publicized and it's a pretty big event. But last month in February, Griner was held at the airport when Russian officials said they discovered cannabis vape cartridges in her baggage. And really, while their team, the Phoenix Mercury, has confirmed in a statement, we remain in constant contact with her family, her representations, the WNBA and the NBA.
Right.
There's not much they can do, right? And what are we going to do, from the standpoint of being the states right now? I know it's illegal here. It's illegal here.
Right.
So in the eyes of the U.S., she did something that was illegal. I don't know that we're going to see anything, come of that. What do you think? Do you know anything about international policy when it comes to that? I know that other countries have way more strict policies when it comes to cannabis than us here. Have you been following that the last month?
Yeah. I've been following it, and I think, Jared, we talked about the Olympic sprinter, months back, and all of this again just reminds me, right, that the United States has helped to set world policy on cannabis, right? And the fact that we have, really exported this view that cannabis is dangerous, needs to be, dealt with harshly. The whole way, that the United States approached drug policy in general, right? We never adopted a harm reduction model. We wanted to see this treated as law enforcement. That kind of wrongheadedness, caused the World Doping Association to stop, to crush the dreams of Sha'Carri Richardson some months ago, and that same kind of wrongheadedness is now allowing Russia to use Brittney Griner as a pawn, right? And and what do we know over the years, right? That whether people are in possession or not, law enforcement in this country or, customs agents in the Soviet Union are going to, or in Russia rather, are going to use this to, in this way to go after Brittney Griner, right? And I've seen,
right.
And so it is really delicate. I think that, there's probably an effort to try to deal with this more behind the scenes and quietly, and not let Russia make a larger statement around it. But to me there's a through line here of just how global policy around cannabis, instead of the U.S. being a leader and saying, you know what, this was wrongheaded, we need to rethink it. The longer we stay stuck, we could be having this conversation every 6 months, right? With something that's come up, but it's really tragic. It just reminds me that so much of what we talk about around cannabis is not only plays out domestically, but on the global stage as well.
Right. And what a time for her to be over there right now. What a time for her family to be going through this. I mean, I couldn't imagine, with everything that's happening between Russia and Ukraine and all that kind of stuff. It's
right
to have her there. And, I'm not even, I probably should look that up. I'm not familiar with the punishment for cannabis or small amounts or that kind of thing, over there. So I don't even know what she's technically facing as far as that goes. So really, that's got to be scary for her and her family right now, because it's a time of war over there. It literally is a time of war. And while she is not a prisoner of war, how do you see it differently if you're her family, right? Like, you're over there imprisoned during a time of war. That's scary.
Yeah, most definitely. So, I just hope she gets home safe and sound soon.
Yeah, no, and really, prayers and thoughts go out to her and her family, and really, again, this just speaks to the fact that as a world leader when it comes down to the consciousness around cannabis. We've got to get our act together and make it so that we start leading the way with these policies, so that stuff like this doesn't continue to happen. Or else, again, we're going to be bringing, like you said, every 6 months, we're going to be bringing attention to another matter, of which is just like this, on the atrocity of somebody being locked up over something like this.
Yeah.
And so, it's horrible, but it goes to the mindset again of the current administration, right? Current administration just came out, the Political article that was discussing that candidates for security clearance employment will cease to be considered if they have ever invested in a cannabis company or are currently invested in a cannabis company. And if that doesn't speak volume as to where their mindset is, I don't know what does. I know you also kind of spoke out about that. I'd love to go over your response there.
Oh, it's like, here we are, an industry that is a job creating engine in the United States right now. The latest figures just out show 430,000 people now employed in the cannabis industry, top 25 billion in sales last year. Anyone who is thinking about the future should be thinking about, hey, how do I invest in this the fastest growing industry in the United States? So for the Biden administration to somehow, I don't know, equate this with some kind of indecency, or to use this and just so folks put it in context. I mean, this is going to impact millions of people who have security clearance, right? And they either have to now dump their investments or quit their job, right? So it is it's just outrageous, right? And it's this wrongheadedness around cannabis policy that we continue to see from this administration. But it also underscores again, that Congress has to also act and make this, the changes that comprehensive legislation will usher in will help here. But that requires leadership, right? And we got leadership in the House and we got leadership in the Senate, but we don't have leadership on this coming from the White House. And that's unfortunately leading to, just connecting these dots from, again, Brittney Griner to people whose security clearance could be threatened, is just, you deny security clearance for reasons that, have to do with someone being able to be compromised, right? I mean, or if you have a series of gambling debts, right? But you don't, just because somebody wants to be a savvy investor in the fastest growing industry in the United States, to me, that's the person that I want to have, jobs in, in government, because that's a pretty wise person, if you ask me. It's on any,
Well, it boils down to, again, what message is saying, right? When it comes down to is we're working on things retrospectively when it comes down to legalization in certain states and expungement and all that kind of stuff. We're really looking to clear up the record. And what the administration is saying essentially is, let's clear up our record here. Let's clear up what we're saying. It doesn't matter if you did it before or currently involved with one. Right now it's illegal and you shouldn't be investing in it.
Hey, Jared, let me make one other point there that USCC said in our statement, which was that, the Biden administration hasn't had any problem taking money from the cannabis business, right? There are several companies and individuals that, wrote us checks, right? So the hypocrisy is rich here, right? So
Oh yeah.
So, you know, so I just hope that that policy that gets revisited, right? I don't know what will happen in this administration, but there has to be some pushback on that because people should not have to um, give up opportunities to invest and provide for their families and their future wealth
Right.
potential because of some wrong-headed government policy.
No, absolutely. It's antiquated. I think somebody earlier said that it's just basically what was it? I saw somebody else in the comments. I can't scroll up on the comments. Sorry about that. But it's just antiquated thinking, and these politicians
Right.
have to get up to date with this. And,
Right.
and yeah, I mean, boils down to the fact that this is commerce. It's providing jobs. It's providing taxes, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's I don't know if it's a RICO qualification of what the government's doing here, but it's definitely some Gestapo tactics here as to where it's
Mhm.
you're basically having to pay the 280E tax with no deductions, but
Well,
they're still
yeah.
taking money, like you said, and that's well, they're acknowledging it right there. So the fact is if it's being
Right.
done in a legal fashion, why shouldn't it be? And really, again, I think what
Right.
we're talking about here is the fact that this administration is saying something without directly saying it. As far as that goes, it's in their heads. It's
Yeah.
going to
Yeah.
remain federally illegal, um,
Right.
based on how I read that, right? Because why would it be a point to bring up if we were inching closer to
Mhm.
decriminalization and/or allowing states' rights to reign freedom?
Mhm.
And so, yeah,
Well,
um,
we have over 20 CEOs coming to Washington next week for a fly-in to walk the halls of Congress. It'll be our second time doing that, and from companies of all sizes. But I have no doubt that this will be raised in some of those meetings.
oh yeah,
It's just outrageous. Yeah, I mean, look, you and I have friends who call us all the time wanting to know how to invest. I
oh
know I
yeah,
do.
oh yeah, every
You
day,
know,
and it's really a lot of that's being held back because of the stance
yeah.
of the government, and they're really, yeah. I mean, the states are seeing it. It's tough to understand why
Mhm.
the government's not taking steps further faster, right? So
Right.
yeah, but on the other side of it, the states keep taking steps forward, right? And
Yeah.
with New York and their new equity
Mhm.
package, they
Mhm.
look like they're taking a look at the current landscape. They're seeing who was affected by this, and they're even
Right.
including their children on as far as the equity licenses for the first
Mhm.
100 to 200 commercial cannabis permits.
Mhm.
That basically, if you had a parent who have a parent, guardian, child, or spouse or dependent who has been convicted of a cannabis offense, to be front of the
Mhm.
line with that. And I think
Yeah.
you're starting to see some acknowledgement here by the states, the people who are dealing with it
Right.
on the ground level, of what these antiquated laws really have done, and what effect they've taken on their local communities.
Right.
So yeah, it's good to see that going, and again, that's one of those ones that I know that you spoke up about. What do you think about what's going on in New York right
Uh,
now?
Look, I think it's great, and I think for a couple of reasons, right? First, I want to see more folks that were damaged by the war on drugs, the war on cannabis, have an opportunity to come into the industry, right? This should be a large, robust industry that has space for everybody. And
Right,
I think New York is doing a great job with not only, to your point, Jared, not only making it available for those folks who were immediately impacted, But there's a restorative justice component here that reminds me of my criminal justice work, right? Where it also is extending to families and children, right? Like I used to work on some innocence cases when, people would end up rotting in prison for years. One of the deals that we got struck back then was that, hey, look, it's too late for me to go to college, but the state of Illinois, just as an example, will give now free college tuition to my kids if they want to go, right? So it's that kind of acknowledgement that I really like about the New York, what New York is doing, which is great.
Yeah. Well, and they're actually, it looks like they're actually taking a look at what other states have done, and they're trying to learn from
Yeah,
it, as opposed to
yeah,
the rest of
yeah,
the states seemingly just kind of,
yeah,
putting on the blinders and
yeah,
doing what's going to fill the coffers, and what seems to
right,
be, what's getting them the votes. So yeah, it's good
yeah,
to see New York actually putting some thought into this as they're building it out.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, they're also, when it comes down to it, is they're experiencing kind of their own gray market right now, just because they did the same thing as California in the beginning. Um, but they're taking this time period to clarify
yeah,
some stuff, and really, as to where California dropped the ball on the equity packages, and LA
yeah,
specifically, New
right,
York is making sure that it's going to happen statewide, as opposed to California basically allowed the different municipalities to deal with it, and realistically, I'd say that less than 25% of the municipalities around here in California have any sort of equity packages, and we all know how LA went, or is going.
yeah, yeah. I think to your point, I think New York has learned wisely, right? It needs to be statewide. The jurisdictions had the opportunity to opt out, but they didn't, but they had to, affirmatively opt out, or else you were in, right? In terms of allowing cannabis commerce within the jurisdiction. And, last but not least, New York is putting up 200 million for an operating pot, which will apparently come out of the state tax coffers. It's a little unclear. It sounds like they'll use the money to help people, like uh, get a space, make it, do the build out and all of that. But look, that'll be significant savings. It'll be interesting. It's a really interesting model, right? Because the state may end up being the owner and leasing out some of these spaces. It'll be an interesting model to see. But anything that allows people to come in and lower their cost to operate, right? So if the state is able to pick up this part of it, people can, that's money they don't have to spend on build out and securing property and all of that, and they can, spend that money on product and get going. So that's great.
Well, which is acknowledging what we were just talking about earlier with this whole the Biden administration not
Mhm.
wanting people to invest in cannabis. You're not picking up bank loans. You're not picking up extra money. It's tough to find investors for
Yeah,
for emerging cannabis markets, and
right.
realistically, yeah,
Yeah.
that type of policy addresses those issues, which is
Mhm.
nice, because there's
Yeah.
nothing like that over here in California. There's nothing helping those people. I mean, I
Yeah.
that receive the social equity packages, and there's tax breaks on the end of it, but that means you have to put all that money up front that you were just talking about, and so there's no break on that. The barrier to entry is just as
Right.
expensive for everybody as it is
Mhm.
anybody, right? So
Yep.
yeah,
Sure.
again, they're actually taking some
Mhm.
intuitive steps there, and
Mhm.
listening, and they're looking, and they're learning. And New York seems to be something that I'm sure, as we go forward here, different states are going to have to model after somebody, and hopefully
Mhm.
New York squirrels out, with some positive vibes, and they're able to get this thing under control there, because that would be a model of which we could all learn a little bit more from. I'm
Yep,
definitely
absolutely.
certain of it. Yeah. So that realistically brings us to the bonus. I know you brought it up already, but you're going to be hosting 25 leaders from around the cannabis industry. You're going to have CEOs next week for meetings with Congress on the federal priorities and that kind of stuff. You want to talk a little bit more about that, or how,
So I just think it is going to be so important for members of, from everyone in the cannabis industry. If somebody's coming to Washington to take their kid to see college or a field trip, go see your representative in Congress, right? I want to make sure that we, the thing about DC is you gotta be in folks' faces, right? So we will continue to bring CEOs to Washington at least a couple of times a year. But this is an important time, right? Because we're waiting on Senator Schumer and Booker and Wyden to introduce the Cannabis Administration and Opportunity Act. That should be coming in April. That's what we're hearing, Jared. And that bill needs to get introduced, obviously. But I don't think the votes are there yet in the Senate to get that passed. But where the votes are is to get safe banking passed, and that's something that we are looking very closely at, and we'll be talking to members of Congress about. So important that cannabis is going to be like most things in Congress, right? We're going to see building blocks. It's going to be no set formula, right? That's going to get us to comprehensive to a comprehensive bill. But what we do got to do is get muscle memory going, right? I want members of Congress to get used to voting on cannabis reform, right?
there you go.
Little stuff and big stuff, right? I just want it to be like, oh yeah, this is cannabis. Oh yeah, we, legislators got to develop muscle memory around our issue, right? Where they get used to the thought, that we vote on cannabis reform, right? And
Right.
So that's the work in front of us, right? But hey, it's part of the muscle memory. Just like, hey, I'm getting a bunch of CEOs in from the cannabis industry, right? So that's the irony, right? Up the street, the White House is telling people to divest, and members of Congress are meeting with some of the leading CEOs in the country, right? But this is progress, right? You speak with folks who, I have plenty of folks who will say like, hey, 8 years ago, we would have only seen the intern.
Yeah.
But now, there's an acceptability and a recognition that this is a serious industry and a serious supplier of jobs in the country. So that's that's why we're coming to Washington with our people next week.
Well, I think you brought up a great point there, in that muscle memory, right? I guess also normalizing the narrative, right? So for here, This is a conversation we're trying to have, and make it so that it's part of the everyday talk, bring these issues to light so people can begin talking about it in normal conversation. But again, on the level of the politicians, you do need to normalize that word cannabis in their face every day, and really that's a great thing that you brought up there, because that is part of beginning to break down those barriers, beginning to have them hear it every day, and normalizing the word cannabis, normalizing the industry, normalizing the processes, right? And so that's great work you're doing there with them. I'm really excited to see how that turns out. We'll be reporting on it, I'm sure. And that brings me to a point that I wanted to kind of remind everybody who is watching. I know that U.S. Cannabis Council at the moment basically opened up mostly to brands and groups. So anybody who's washing If you want to join or think about looking into the U.S. Cannabis Council, go ahead, go to the website and check that out. There's ways for brands and companies to get involved. But
Sure.
on an individual level, Cannabis in Common, that's still the place to go, right? CannabisInCommon.org.
Yeah.
How to get
Yes.
involved.
Yes. CannabisInCommon.org is the place to go. There's a link on the USCC website as well. That's where folks go to send letters to their, and it's been dropped in the chat now. Send letters off to your senator, members, your House rep, expressing your full support for the end of federal prohibition and legalization. Yeah.
Nice. Perfect. Well, and to everybody who's been in the comments with us, thank you very much. I saw that we had a couple people who were part of the armed services, and thank you all for your service and helping us with our country. And this conversation here it started with a medical talk. It started with providing antidotal medicinal help to people such as veterans who deal with PTSD and all the different things that are involved with having served your country, whether it's injury or mental health issues or that kind of thing. So really this is what it's about, normalizing that conversation and making sure that we have the masses know that it's time for us to get up there and to change some things, because otherwise 5 years from now we just get to bitch about it more. So again, Steve, thank you so much for coming on. It's always a great pleasure.
Well, always great to be on, Jared.
Hey, we'll see you next month, second weekend again, second Friday again. Hopefully we have some good stuff to discuss there, and by that time John will be back with us. But hey, a pleasure. Have a great weekend.
You too.
And for everybody, again, we've got the links up in the comments, and have a great weekend out there, everybody. Thanks again for joining, and we'll talk to you soon.
Take care all. Thank you.